Very good evening to esteemed speakers, respected Vice Chancellor, Registrar, faculty, members of press and students. I cordially welcome you all on behalf of the organizing committee to the inaugural edition of the NALSAR Student Bar Debate. In the last 1 year, NALSAR has played host to some of the greatest minds of India as a part of our public policy lecture series. The lecture series has generated a culture of inquisitiveness and pushed the boundaries of our academic curriculum. With the student bar debate, we endeavor to keep pushing boundaries because as students of law, it is our belief that we should never settle without questioning. We should never believe without debate, and we should never learn within limitations. The motion for this edition of the debate is this House will ban all organized political activity on Indian campuses. It is evident from the phrasing of the motion that it has been left open-ended, as we believe there are many models through which student politics work in our country. It is broad enough to encompass a range of perspectives, from a ban on student politics to a ban on organized student politics. To propose the motion today, we have with us Mr. Adithya Reddy, an eminent lawyer in the Madras High Court, also a passionate writer about political and social causes. Mr. Syed Sultan Ahmed, an avid orator, managing director of LXL Ideas, and an educator. And finally, we have Ms. Sarala Samira Mursupalli, who is currently pursuing second year of law here at NALSAR. Against the motion, we have Shri Shankar Aiyar, Shankar Aiyar, former cabinet minister, diplomat, thinker, journalist and writer that we all look up to. Mr. A.K. Khan, current director of Anti-Corruption Bureau, Telangana. And Professor G. Hargopal, a distinguished political scientist and an ICSSR National Fellow with Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Hyderabad. I also take great pleasure in introducing to you all the moderator of today's debate, Mr. Pranav Verma, or as we all lovingly call him, Justice Verma. Without any further delay, I will hand this over to Verma ji. Thank you.
Audible? Thank you, Ren, and good evening, everyone. We are indeed honored to have such a distinguished panel with us today. Without much ado, I'll begin with explaining the format for today's debate. So we'll begin by taking a preliminary vote on the motion amongst all of us to see which side of the motion do we stand on currently, and towards the end of the debate we'll take a vote on the motion again to see have our opinions changed, and after hearing our speakers and panelists today. So we'll begin by first speaker for the motion, who will be proposing the motion with their views, followed by the first speaker against the motion. Similarly, this will be followed by the second speaker for the motion, second speaker against the motion, third speaker for the motion, and third speaker against the motion. After the debates on substantive points, we'll have rebuttals by one speaker representing each side, and we'll end with the question and answer session and the final vote. So let me begin by taking a vote on the motion before the House as it is right now, that this House will ban all organized political activities on our campuses. All those for the motion, a clear show of hands, please. For the motion. Okay. And those against the motion. Okay. So I think we have a clear winner towards the against right now. Let's see if the views remain the same or change towards the end of the debate. Without much ado, I'd like to call upon our first speaker for the motion. Please put your hands together for Mr. Syed Sultan Ahmed.
Can I just get this sheet out. Respected Chairperson, my fellow speakers, respected Vice Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here as a chemical engineer to speak at a law school's debate and the first ever debate. I've spent the large part of the past 15 years working with students. When I started off in school, when I looked around the world, it just seemed like there was one thing that we were trying to pursue in this country in the name of education, and that was the livelihood. Everyone wanted a good school so that you got into a good college, and everyone wanted a good college so that you got into a good job. It was all about the livelihood. In this entire process, we've always forgotten that there's a life that we have to live, and there's very little learning that happens when it comes to life itself. So this evening here, I'm going to talk to you as a teacher, as a researcher, as someone who's been working very closely with students across this country. I live in a world which you share with me. It's not just the weather outside, but the world that I live in is really gloomy. I mean, just look at the kind of issues that we're dabbling with as a nation, as a society. Simple ones which we don't bother at all and not on top of our agendas, like the environmental ones. God alone knows the kind of world that we're going to live with environmentally in future. And then you've got the ones that hit us on our faces. My name is Syed Sultan Ahmed, and I happen to be a Muslim growing up in this country. And for a lot of Sultan Ahmeds in this country, life is not very easy, because you are branded because of the kind of religion and the kind of background that you come with. Socio-economic divides that are there in this country, religious divides, the rich and poor. We are living in a gloomy world, let's accept it. But being an educator, I see hope. And the only hope that I see is in the young, is in the youth. And the only hope that is there for the future, that is there for our youth, is education. What should be the purpose of education? It should be equipping our youth with skills so that they handle their lives better tomorrow. Skills like critical thinking to handle issues of caste biases and economic biases. Skills like empathy. Unless you feel for a society that you live with, you're really not going to contribute. You might end up getting yourself a degree or a certificate, but if you have to make a difference with the education or the background that you come with, it's the empathy that matters. It's about interpersonal skills. These skills are really, really important, and that's what colleges and universities need to be focusing on. It's a very different debate as to how we're dealing with it, but I'm going to look at the fact that this is the original purpose of education. And having said that, what about organized political parties, and what is their ground reality today? The word that I've written down over here is the low level of polity with our political parties in this country. Can you imagine growing up as a 16, 18-year-old and looking up to people like these who run our so-called political parties as our leaders? Forget about critical and creative thinking. Common sense seems to be lacking with a lot of our political parties and the people who run them. It's ideologies and dynasties that rule our country's political parties. It's absolute ideologies and dynasties. You need to have names like the Gandhis or the Yadavs or the Gaudas or the Raos, and that's when you tend to become known or do well in the field of organized politics. What kind of debates do we have? Seriously? I'm an entrepreneur. I was bloody excited when I got to know that there's something like a GST coming in and makes my life easier, right? I don't know how many of you know that whenever you went into a 5-star hotel, you paid a VAT as well as a service tax, which is stupid. But there were simple things that would have saved our lives. And it came up from one political party, and they make sure that, it's been held back for the longest time. So what's the purpose of our polity? It just seems so selfish. It just seems like our political parties are no longer interested in the common man. It's about their egos, which seem to be so much bigger. The other very interesting thing about political parties is it kills individual opinion. I'm not going to elaborate because I'm sure all of you know what I'm said by that. It kills individual opinion. And just the kind of money that is involved in politics today. Even if you want to stand up for a councillor's election, you need to spend in crores. So that's the state and the ground reality of organized politics in our country. What happens when organized political parties enter campuses and universities? The less said, the better. Look around and you see issues like what happened in the JNU, the whole Kanhaiya episode. Not very far away from where we are today, what happened in the Hyderabad University. When you are a bunch of young people, you do have issues. People do make mistakes. How does that get blown out of proportion? You bring in political ideologies, blow it out of proportion, and then you've got the bigwigs, the union ministers, the state ministers getting involved. You've got parties taking opposite stands. And what happens to the issue which originally started off? The issue gets lost. The one who actually sacrificed the life or lost his life is completely forgotten, and then it gets down to the streets with fights and fights. I come from Bangalore. Yesterday I was in my Mumbai office. I flew down from Bangalore today. And just look at the quality of our roads. There's just no concern for the common man out there. And seriously, there's no empathy for the college students. Any organized political party within a college or a university looks at these young college students as free foot soldiers, painting them with their ideologies and making them run around. Imagine you sitting in this auditorium and you're divided on the basis of the fact that you eat a particular meat and some of you don't eat a particular meat. And then you have these debates happening around, what kind of ideologies that you follow. So here are a couple of other points that I wanted to make in this getting politics inside campuses. When outsiders get inside your campus, you should be deciding how your student bodies should be run. Why should outsiders decide? If anyone's followed the DU or the JNU elections, they do something called as Shakti Pradarshan. In case you're not aware of what Shakti Pradarshan is, it's a massive entourage of some of the best vehicles that you get in Delhi, the Land Rovers and the Hummers, going through the streets of the DU and the JNU just to show the students who's more powerful. Right? Money comes in, ideologies come in, and you have the outsiders coming in and trying to tell you what's good for you. At a university level, you guys believe that you can change the world. How many of you believe that at your age, you can change the world? Put up your hands, please. Then why should somebody's ideology decide what you should be doing and which side you should be going? And by the way, this is for my fellow speakers here. I don't know how many of you are aware, I'm not a lawyer, but when I looked up on the net, I realized there's something called as the Lingdo Committee Report of 2006, which very clearly outlines that organized political parties need to stay out of campuses. And this has been principally agreed upon by the Supreme Court as well. It's been accepted. There are many states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, if I hope my statistics is right, have accepted it in its complete form, and there are states like Bihar and UP which have not yet implemented it. And further, the Lingdo Committee report also goes on to say, how do you elect bodies in a campus? It's simple. We did that in school. Remember your class representative? You elected your class representative. The representative elected the college representative, and the college representative went up to the university. That's one of the formats he suggested. Similarly, if it's a much smaller university, all students go on to elect a student body. He's actually outlined 4 or 5 very simple, commonsensical ways of electing student bodies. So ladies and gentlemen, what I want to outline over here is that leadership is really important to be developed in students at the university and at college level. We need to develop that. But are politicians our best examples? Oh, hell no. When I look around, the field of corporate, the field of art, the field of literature, the field of defense, the field of sport, they have plenty of supremely creative, innovative leaders who can be great examples for our youth in colleges and in universities. I don't think we should be looking up to politicians, especially with the kind of politicians that we have out there. Till the level of polity improves, I hope it happens in my lifetime, I think we just go with what the Supreme Court has agreed with, that we keep organized political parties out of college campuses, because the only hope that we have for our nation is you guys, the youth, and the only hope that you have is education. And let's leave politics out of education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll listen from Professor who's against the...
Now, friends, I think Mr. Syed has very vocally, very forcefully argued why organized political parties should not be allowed into the campuses. But basically, the assumption that all students have their own opinions, they are entitled for their individual opinions, and why should somebody decide the thinking process of the young people on the campus? Now, that is the basic assumption. That assumption is of an atomistic individual who is so autonomous from the larger structure that this autonomous atomistic individual will decide for himself or herself what should one do, what one should not do. He also said that one is entitled for one's own opinions, and why should somebody from outside shape and influence the opinions of the younger generation. And he also said that organized political parties' quality standard has come down, and why low-level politics should come into campuses which are supposed to be at a higher pedestal. I think these are the main arguments that Mr. Syed so forcefully presented. I would only argue that number one, that the definition of politics and the politics that are practiced are two different things. Number one, in my, because I teach political science, and I define politics as a science of analyzing the problems of the society and art of solving the problems of society. Politics is the most creative invention of the human beings, where an individual cannot solve the problems. When you attempt to collectively solve the problem, that becomes politics. It's a collective power. But why do we have different organized political parties? When there is a problem, human beings do not have, being creative, do not have a single solution to the problem. And each political party has its own way of solving the problems of the society. And when there are different organized political parties, there are multiple solutions to a problem. At a given point of time in history, which solution works, which solution carries the people, I think becomes important, and that's how politics, present the creative part of the human society. Now, if organized political parties, if their standard is very low, I am asking the students of this law university, who will raise the standards of this politics? If the students of law university are completely kept outside the organized political process, then if the youth of the country is not involved in the process, and one of the advantages of youth is that they remain honest, they are creative, they have energy, they have an imagination, they have a future. Who shape the future of the nation? And if organized political parties, if their quality and the standard has come down, do we leave this entire organized political parties to themselves? Do we allow them to further deteriorate? Or the youth wing of a political party corrects? It pressurizes the party to improve its standards. Otherwise the youth themselves join the politics, whoever can take the risk and the hazard of what politics are. But if nobody is willing, and the bright boys say, now I'm teaching in Bangalore National Law School, I know that the students are very bright. I'm teaching the public policy student. In fact, one of the BJP students, who is in the party, a member of the BJP party, he was offered the member of parliament, but he came and joined the law school, and he tells me, sir, I want to equip myself. I have come to university to equip myself. Next election I may contest. If I become a policy maker, I would like to look to the university to equip me for that. Now, in other words, if the organized political activity of a nation is the way you have ordered your politics, then if the organized political parties enter, it's not necessary that you should follow like a sheep your political party. Your political party is something where you can correct, you can argue, you can pressurize and say that this is what is happening. It's the function of the youth. And therefore, I would say that organized political activity, which my friend was telling that it has brought down the standard, yes, standards have gone down. But if you leave this process, then it may end up in a disaster for the future of the nation. Because without politics, a society can't enjoy. A society cannot function. Political activity is the breathing, space, it's a breathing of the society. And that's the reason why I would argue that organized political parties, there are different wings. There are political, he was talking of the JNU, he was talking of the Delhi University. Yes, there is SFI, there is ASFI, there is CPML group, there is the ABVP, there is the NSUI, all political parties are there. And then the students keep on organizing, argue, debate among themselves, different lines. The only problem perhaps is that when the organized political party enters the university system, there is a possibility that the conflict, it can be raised to a level where it can become physical attacks. That is the only fear from the organized political parties, because sometimes they instigate violence. That's where I would say that the students should be guard. They should be under guard. I would say that all organized political activity, there can be student wing, but political parties, if they are not responsible, and if they do not take the responsibility of, keeping the student body to argue, to work, but if they push them into the physical conflict, I think the institution gets subverted. There I would say that there is a little bit of a problem. But in my own university, when we wanted to have a code of conduct for all our student bodies, and I was heading the committee, we called a general body meeting of all the students. And I said that you draft a code of conduct for yourself. Number one, under no condition you will resort to physical violence on the campus. Because you have come here to pursue, to creatively improve yourself. Physical violence subverts the institution. I also told them that whatever solution you have, sit and talk. You debate. Why you believe in a particular line that will improve the India, that will shape the future of India. You creatively argue, you sit like friends who talk, because it's an ideological difference. And ideological difference need not be personal, physical difference. Ideological difference at an intellectual level. And boys who have debated and go back and join the organized political party, today we have so many people from ABVP, right or wrong, we may agree, we may not agree with their politics, but so many ministers are from ABVP. Now today you would say that ABVP contributed to the cabinet, right? And the defense minister is there, Maharashtra chief minister, all of them have gone from the student party. In the CPI, CPM, many of them are, including the Prakash Karat and all that, they have come student politics. Jayapal Reddy was student union president, when we were, Usman University student, he is senior to me by 2 years. This is how the nation has had the benefit of these, young people coming and joining the political parties and running the political system. So therefore, I would say to insulate universities, number one, it is not possible. Number two, it's not desirable. It's not possible also. When the organized political parties are there outside and they want their own youth wings, how are you going to insulate if you ban the entire political activity? Supreme Court at one point thought. But Mr. Lindo, who was heading the commission, was a faculty member of my university when I was the dean. We have requested him to be on the faculty of University of Hyderabad. And one day, incidentally he said, Hargopal, I am heading a commission. I want all politics should be banned. I said, why, sir? Then he said, no, elections are leading to, students are quarreling. The campus's atmosphere is spoiled. I said, as a chairman of the election commission, do you think the organized political parties were really doing well? And if you say that the organized political parties are indulging in violence, do you ban all political parties? And if you ban all the political parties, what happened to democracy? I said that can't be the criterion. Then I asked him, go and see JNU and look at University of Hyderabad. 25 years, never our, schedule was upset. Not that we have all student groups on our campus. JNU is one of the most disciplined universities in the country. Its academic schedule was never upset, while all students are vibrant. In fact, one of the JNU vice chancellor tells a joke that when somebody committed a theft, all student bodies, different ideological groups act. They didn't hand over the thief to a police. They said why theft happened in the campus. They went on debating, origin of theft, beginning of theft, crime in the society. Then I believe thief said, please hand over me to police because this suffering I can't put up. In other words, they were trying to find out the causation. Now, you are, in other words, what is politics? Politics is debating the cause of the, what happened in society. And therefore, friends, I would very strongly say that if you ban anything banning, that's the reason for motion, most of you have voted against the motion for simple reason, anything bad looks very undemocratic. And ban, there can be self-restraint, there can be self-regulation, but you can't ban something. Banning is totalitarian, banning is authoritarian, banning brings completely dictatorial culture in the society. If the youth of a society are cut off from the organized political activity, I am afraid India has no future. I would love that students should become members of the political party. They should have different points of view. They should examine, they should debate the different futures of India and what type of decent society you want, what type of society you want to live in. That's a political. There is no other way of creating a new society without politics, without a creative involvement of human beings. And therefore, if you abdicate your responsibility, of creating a new future, and if the universities, which are supposed to be the vibrant nerve center of a nation, if that abdicates the politics and abdicates the political parties, abandon them, say that we are interested in our studies, he said that we should have a compassion and concern. Concern is political. Those who have concern get into public life. If people with concerns are not getting, that's not the, we can't blame the politics. People with concern, what are you going to do with your concern? My friend said that you have to have a concern. What do you do with your concern? Concern has to go as an input in the policy. Concern should go into the collective activity in solving the problems of society. Individual concern can remain very individualistic. I have concern for the society, but I don't do anything about it. If I want to do something, it's political. I want to do through an organized political party, my political party, I can pressurize. What all therefore I am saying is a code of conduct not to indulge in violence, number one, having a code of conduct for, for how to negotiate among themselves, have a civilized relation, and ideological differences are always fascinating, fantastic. I have a friend, a scientist. When we were very young, like you, we used to debate. Whenever he lost an argument, he used to be excited. My God, today I got a new point. Losing an argument. That democratic culture should be there. When you argue, it has to be very fantastic, fascinating, creative argument. So argument, multiple arguments, right, connected with the organized political activity outside, I think is a part of the organic process of society. And therefore, I reject the motion. Sir, I reject the motion totally for the simple reason that banning anything on the campus, since I am a political science teacher, I know what are its implications. Nations which are totalitarian ban politics. Nations which are democratic never ban politics on the campus. If you are more democratic, you have to have more creative debate on the campus. I think therefore the general worry is, since the campuses have become, there is a law and order problem, Mr. Khan is here and he is supporting the motion and he is rejecting the motion. That is refreshing. He has dealt with these problems of law and order. But in spite of dealing, I think through his own life experience, he realized more organized collective activity helps in maintaining law and order than banning the politics, because that will create more law and order problems on the campus. Really, when you have a law and order problem on the campus, if you do not have organized groups, you don't even know whom to approach. Recently, sir, in Karnataka, when the textile, these garment workers, 1 lakh women came on the streets. Nobody knew whom to negotiate. They have no trade union. There is no organized activity. There is no organized party. Government didn't know whom to negotiate with. And they just came on, started burning, attacking the police stations. See, if you do not have an organized activity on the campus, vice chancellors are happy up to some, but if the law and order breaks down, vice chancellor doesn't know how to deal with it because he doesn't know whom to talk to. If you have organized student activity, you can call all these 8 student union and talk to them. So I think, a creative society, I would say that last point, in history, the youth of the universities, the students of universities made history. Who are what about the freedom movement? When Gandhi gave a call, who responded? Have not the students come into the freedom movement? Do you call it political or non-political? If the students say, no, I am worried about my studies, I will not come into freedom movement, is it possible? So many lawyers joined the freedom movement. Nehru was a lawyer, Rajendra Prasad was a lawyer, Gandhi was a lawyer, Sardar Patel was a lawyer. So many lawyers joined politics at the time of the freedom movement. And when America entered the Vietnam, it was the American university fought against American and asked them to get out of Vietnam because it's injustice. Youth of America fought. So therefore, youth of a nation, given the age, given the promise, given the potential, it is always necessary students take interest in the politics of their country and correct the distortion rather than abandon politics. I think I would therefore say that the motion is most undemocratic and therefore it should be rejected. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Before inviting our next speaker, I would like to request everyone to please keep your mobile phones on switch off since it is with the speaker system. Thank you. Next speaker for the motion is Mr. Adithya.
I can keep it on this. Good evening. First of all, it's such a privilege to be on the same panel as stalwarts like this. I mean it. And I am more of a writer than a speaker, so you'll excuse me if I don't sound as interesting. And also, as a student of Professor Madhav Menon, the choice was not very difficult for me in terms of taking the side, because he had designed national law schools as a concept that is divorced from organized political activity. Let me just begin by quoting Justice Krishna Aiyar's criticism of the Kerala High Court's views on campus politics. I'll just quote it because they match a lot of views that Professor Hargopal just mentioned. I quote, it's from the front line. To banish politics for an 18-year-old student is to deny him the fundamental opportunity of becoming a good citizen to vote. It is anti-democratic to refuse a student a campus opportunity to talk politics, to read politics, to discuss politics, to argue politics with his fellow students. Then he jumps that orderly political activity by a student community will cause chaos on the campus is a fashionable fallacy and a dubious diagnosis. That's his usual style. So now I think Krishna Aiyar here is clubbing two ideas which stand on a totally different footing. One is, of course, your constitutional right to debate politically, to discuss in campus, outside campus. It is a constitutionally guaranteed right. But to say that this right automatically leads to your right to participate in organized political activity is an entirely different thing. Firstly, of course, it is not a constitutionally guaranteed right, but speaking for the motion, I can't rest there. I'll have to prove that it is not only not a constitutionally guaranteed right, but it is actually harmful and deserves to be banned. So, we know what the reality of campus politics is. We know what the ideal was during the freedom struggle. We know what the ideal was when students protested in France in 1968, leading to a wave of anti-authoritarian movements throughout the world. But what is the reality of student politics today? We know that it is so inextricably intertwined with party politics, with regional politics, with local politics, that it's hard to tell the difference. Why does it happen? Because political parties find students to be a very easy political resource. They're easily mobilizable. They're a very quick form to add to heat and size of any political movement. And for some political ideologies, students are actually an integral part of their larger ideals. It may be interesting to note that the student community in Soviet Russia was the last bastion to fall to the Bolsheviks. They were the most resistant to, after the October Revolution, to fall to the Bolsheviks. But that's a part of the larger scheme of communist thinking. But the problem comes where the pernicious aspects of your party politics at the state level, at the regional level and the national level rubs off on student politics. In West Bengal, we know that the political culture itself is so violent that in 2010, when you had a competing political party rise up in the form of the TMC after 30 years of communist dominance, you had the first case of campus killing of a young SFI student called Swapan Kole allegedly by TMC students. In Uttar Pradesh, you know that campus politics is nothing but a direct extension of casteism in state politics. You just can't divide both. Mulayam Singh Yadav's government was notorious for inducting criminal elements into campus politics and for shielding them against administrative action. In fact, when the Lucknow University was planning to take some action against some of these elements, he's famously quoted to have said, you can't call people goondas for doing a little bit of jumping around. So that is the attitude of our politicians towards student politics. And in fact, I was reading an interesting incident from a newspaper which I'd like to quote. It was about a college girl in Mumbai. I'm just reading the newspaper report. A Mumbai college girl who had lost her library card got a duplicate one made, only to find that her lost card had been misused and someone had issued books in her name. The librarian fined her rupees 400 for not returning the book on time. Infuriated, the girl returned with 4 MNS party workers who barged into the principal's office and ensured that action against the girl was dropped. So for the students also, this nexus is quite convenient because this political backing emboldens them to do all sorts of things, including beat up teachers, destroy campus infrastructure, to indulge in all and take political help for settling purely academic issues like getting attendance, like getting marks, and and this is where I think is the crucial distinction that we need to make, which is to argue that campus politics, organized campus politics has to be banned. We need to keep in mind a basic distinction, which is that students can have political views, but their interests cannot be political. Unlike political parties, their interests have to be academic and education oriented, and therefore there is a qualitative difference between a political party fighting on political issues and political party and a student body fighting on political issues. So it's very similar to Professor Hargopal mentioned the example of lawyers during the freedom struggle, but the lawyers fighting during the freedom struggle or students fighting during the freedom struggle on streets is quite different from what we are talking today, because I come from Chennai where lawyers strike courts at the top of the hat, and I believe they are going to go on strike next week for the Kaveri issue, and they are going to boycott courts, because that is entirely different from lawyers participating in a general strike organized by political parties on the streets. So to ban organized political activity in campus does not mean you are going to ban students or prevent students from participating in political activity on the streets in whatever capacity they want to outside the campus. It's only when it happens within the campus that it's a problem. Now, so coming, I think, to the Lingdo report. So the basic question now is it even necessary to have or is it sufficient to implement Lingdo's committee's report and just ban the interference of political parties so that you have some kind of a pure campus politics? Firstly, of course, it is impracticable because almost every student organization is so strongly affiliated to political parties outside the campus that any ban on political interference is only going to be a namesake. The second is, of course, the fundamental question is whether it is necessary at all, within the campus. I am just reading an extract from the Lingdo committee's report on why Lingdo feels that it may not be that necessary. He says, indeed, in several instances, students themselves express the view that elections are unnecessary as students, especially in professional courses such as engineering, law and management, had very little time. Finally, instances past and present of students rife with the influences of political funding, bracket Delhi, Mumbai, Kerala and UP, and the violence bracket Kerala and UP, which bring about the possible need to do away with the system of elections altogether. This only, is buttressed by various studies which show that students who are actually concerned about academic issues, about their studies, don't participate actively in student politics. It is also borne out by studies which show that student turnout in many of these elections, even in your famous DUSU elections, etc., are very low. Except for states like West Bengal and Kerala, almost throughout the country, student turnout in elections, in campus elections, is very low. So where does the need arise from? This is where Lingdo adds a little bit. He gives a little bit of a rationale. He says there are various instances which are brought to the notice of the committee involving harassment of students by the faculty and administration, including sexual harassment, charging of exorbitant capitation fee for obtaining seats, as well as imposition of unusually harsh norms on day-to-day student life in the name of maintaining discipline. Now I ask myself, first of all, assuming there are legitimate issues in certain circumstances, are these issues not remediable through other means? Even recently the Supreme Court has come down heavily upon capitation fees in medical colleges. It has set norms. Every kind of harassment is redressable through the police, through legal mechanism. It happens regularly. So is it worth that for these concerns you allow certain things, you allow students to form themselves into group and compete in a very likely hostile atmosphere under the influence of political parties? Is it, importantly, is it necessary or is it worth it to allow the youthful idealism of an 18-year-old be blunted by the pragmatism of politicking, of cold electoral calculations? I think he can wait a little bit if he actually wants to do that, right? So I would just like to end with a quotation from the Supreme Court's judgment when it was dealing with a campus murder in Kurukshetra University, and it says, I would endorse this totally. It says, students, particularly in adolescent age, are easily swayable by political parties without much effort or cost, as young and tender minds are susceptible to easy persuasiveness by party leaders. While at the top, leaders belonging to different parties, like Mr. Aiyar, if I may say so, on a lighter vein, dine together and socialize with each other without any personal acrimony as between themselves. It is a pity that they do not encourage that healthy attitude to percolate down to the grassroots level. Tender minds get galvanized on minor issues, frenzy flare-ups even on trivialities. Young children and adolescents, unaware of the disastrous consequences befalling their own future, indulgence in vandalism, mayhem and killing spree against their own fellow students. We think that the time is now ripe for legislative interference to salvage the campus free of political activities. I also strongly feel that there is an imminent need for legislative interference to ban organized political activities in campus. It does not in any way mean a ban on free expression of political views or a ban on students getting involved in politics. There are numerous examples of issues reaching such a level of taking the entire society by storm that you cannot expect students to remain unaffected. I was just reading, it was quite interesting, that the Osmania University hasn't had campus elections in decades now, and the students were at the forefront of the Telangana movement. We didn't prevent them at all from doing it. And Professor Hargopal gave the example of the freedom struggle. The student organization that was at the forefront of the student freedom struggle was the All India Student Federation, and it did not have the same political character it has today, which is a mouthpiece of the CPI. It had, it was completely apolitical. It had members from all sorts of political backgrounds. So banning organized political activity is not going to impede any of your constitutional rights as students or as your growth as future political leaders. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. And I think we have heard a lot of speakers this issue may create. So it's but natural for me to invite the panelists who in handling these issues, and I would like to invite Mr. A.K. Khan to present his views against the motion.
Good afternoon, friends. One year as a General Secretary of a student union when I was doing a post-graduation course. I would not call it for students union, I will call it student council, because we were nominated rather than getting elected at that time. That was the second year of emergency when I was doing my first year of post-graduation. But that time the elections were banned, and some of us who were toppers in the university were placed in those positions. Very reluctantly we went and did that job. And subsequently, after joining IPS for the last 36 years, most of the positions I have held are that of maintaining public order. As Commissioner of Police in Vizag, Vijayawada, Guntur, here, and most of the places have universities. A lot of issues emanating from the universities which impinged on the law and order outside, we had to do it. Experiences there, positive, negative, all types. With all this collective wisdom and collective experiences that I have, still persuade me to take a stand against the motion. But with a lot of riders, I'll define the riders as I go along. I have 4 important reasons as to why I oppose the motion. But before that, I go by the definition given by Professor Hargopal in the initial part of his talk, when he defined the political activity as analyzing a problem, a societal problem, scientifically, and then attempting a solution to that. When you have this definition in mind, then I'll state 4 reasons as to why you should have the political activity. The first, forget about the society outside. Within the institution, you have a lot of issues, a lot of problems confronting the student community. Academic, the place where you live in residential universities of the type you have here in NALSAR. A lot of issues. There should be some organized ventilation of all these ideas which should be put across to the administration. So that is why if you have to articulate and bring these issues to the notice of the administration, even that I would call it a political activity. If you are doing it collectively and putting it, that's an organized political activity for me. So that's number 1 reason. The second reason, perhaps it helps the administration also to collect your views in an organized way so that they can attempt solutions. You may have some issues which are not being put across effectively, properly in an organized way to the administration. But if the student representatives are there on whatever administrative the structures that you have within the university, and you are able to put across those ideas there, perhaps the decisions that are taken by the university administration would be sounder to that extent, and then probably there is better harmony and better understanding between the students and the administration. The student bodies, the elected bodies, could definitely work as a sounding board to take good decisions for the university administration. The third, this is a way in which you can groom yourself in the leadership role, and when you step out of the portals of this university, perhaps you can take a greater role in the democratic institutions and structures outside. And in any case, it's a democratic right in a democratic society to ventilate your thoughts, but put it across in such a way that they're acceptable, and then when you have put across your view, there is some other viewpoint from the other side, you have the opportunity to listen to that side and also modulate your own views. So for these reasons, I think the political activity on the campus is a must. I am again differentiating it totally from the political activity, what happens outside, interference of political parties, etc. In fact, in the year 2006, when Lindo committee was deliberating on whatever is happening here, incidentally Mr. Lindo is settled here, we have a very deep and a close association with him. I was one of those who was consulted because I was Additional Director General of Police Law and Order at that time. We had a lot of disturbance in 3-4 campuses at that time. In Guntur, which is going to be the capital city of Andhra, and here in Usmania city and many other places. That time, a lot of viewpoints were given to the committee. I would endorse a lot of views, opinions, and the decisions that was arrived at by the committee at that particular time. It was very clearly said, organization, elections in whatever mode it is. In some places it could be through nomination, in some places it could be a parliamentary type of the election and the representative system, somewhere direct election where you have small campuses, the so-called the presidential type of election system. All those things were part of the committee's report at the time. But then, one thing was unanimous, the students must have the opportunity to ventilate their grievances, problems of what is confronting them here, as well as if anything is happening outside, they could discuss, deliberate. But at no time, any outside political interference at the time of elections or subsequently should be allowed into the campuses. This was, I totally endorse that view for the reason, I have seen at least 8 to 10 huge disturbances in the universities across Andhra Pradesh at the time, which have marred the futures of thousands and thousands of students for years. Either the academic year had to be scrapped totally because of the disturbance in the campus, or a few months the academic year had to be put off. By the time you came out of the institutions, you were not fit to join. You did not have the time to get into the institutions of higher learning nationally or internationally. And then campus recruitment in technological institutions also went haywire. Once they could not get into the campus recruitment those years, next year they were stale and nobody touched them. A lot of lives altered adversely because of whatever happened at that time. This is why that time when we deliberated in Lindo committee, at the time the deliberations that went on through the Lindo committee, some of us, when we were there in the law enforcing role, we clearly suggested political activity is required within the campus, but the outside influences definitely have to be kept out. How they are kept out, certain steps are spelled out in that. It's difficult, but still it's possible to insulate to a substantial extent if the large body of students also are in agreement with that particular suggestion. So these are the reasons as to why I thought we must have activity, but at the same time in a very responsible, in a controlled manner within the campus. Students should be the best judges for it. The structure you can provide by ensuring that no outside elements come and campaign at the time of elections, no money, muzzle, or any other extraneous consideration comes into the student union elections. So this is what I think, to me, is an organized political activity within the campus minus the intervention of the political parties. Initially I state this position, and then later, if you want any direct experiences or instances to support this, I have umpteen number of them. During the course of your question and answers, probably I will be able to take them on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will next hear from our student speaker, Sarla.
To ensure that the legitimate political activity goes on among the body of students within an institution, certain restrictions that were imposed. One is there should be an age limit for those who contest for the student union elections. So we have seen in the universities, Usmania University, where Professor Hargopal was mentioning, there are postgraduate students who at the age of 35, 36 also were still studying postgraduation for the last 8, 10, 15 years. Their priority is to remain in the campus and do politics. They don't want to move out of the campus. There the primacy is not education, primacy is the political activity. That should not be the consideration. The second one is even the attendance. 70% attendance minimum, that is what was suggested by the Lindo committee. The third one is academic performance. At some places they said, okay, the excellent students should come up, but then many of the students who are very studious and academic, they don't want to get into this activity, so it was toned down, it was suggested that it's okay if they have no backlog, if they have cleared all their subjects, they should be eligible to contest. Certain minimum standards were set. As long as we have such aspects of moderation, perhaps student union activity will definitely be useful to the campus.
All right, good evening everyone. So I guess I'd like to start my speech out by asking you all a question. And essentially that is, what happened? What happened to this country? What went so wrong that when I say student political union organizations within Indian campuses, the first thing that comes to our mind is violence. The first thing that comes to our mind is destruction, is young college children throwing chairs at each other's faces, burning tires on the roads, disrupting their classrooms, throwing rocks at cars and burning buses, vandalizing their own campuses. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. Greedy politicians, with their own self-interests, decided to come in and exploit these students, exploit political organizations within campuses to go ahead and achieve their own means and their own goals, right? They go in and they exploit these fresh young minds who come from different areas across the spectrum across India, and they exploit these individuals to fulfill their own self-interest, to get larger vote banks, to get headlines in the newspapers. That is what happened. And I'll tell you what, these students, they deserve better. We deserve better. My name is Sarla Samira Mursipalli, and I'm a second-year student at NALSAR University. And today, as a government member, I am very, very proud to propose the only logical solution to deal with the absurdity that has become of campus political organizations in the Indian context, right? And we are for the ban of all organized political activity on campuses. Let me be clear, there is a distinction between organized political activity and healthy political engagement on campuses, which is something that we in fact encourage, right? I'll try not to be very repetitive and say things that my co-members have already said, but essentially I'd like to propose a couple different arguments under the broad themes, right? Number one, that student political organized activity on Indian campuses has led to the unfortunate politicization by major political parties and politicians, leading to the exploitation of these students, right? The fact is, and this is something that I would also like to say to Mr. Professor Hargopal, that no college or no campus in India actually advocates for violence, right? We do have laws, we do have safeguards, we do have certain procedures that is against violence, but yet it happens. And the reason why it happens is because you have this third-party influence by these political parties that come into these campuses and influence these students to partake in different issues that necessarily are not for their interests, right? Now, we do agree that post-Indian independence, India has definitely witnessed a genesis of numerous political parties with numerous different ideologies that have come together and necessarily played a role in influencing policy and creating decisions that have been good for them and their own welfare. These political unions have, in the past, been beneficial and instrumental in creating better welfare, such as academic policies, student welfare policies, tuition, etc. But that is no longer the case, right? We tell you that no more are these political organizations productive entities that discuss and engage and solve issues, but rather they are proxies for these political organizations to use them and to exploit them to gain their own self-interests, right? Mr. Speaker, as a young college student, we are not at all advocating for the ban or the total ban of student politics altogether, but rather the ban of organized student political activity and what they have become, something that we will address later on in our speech, right? Nowadays, these students, these political organizations have become proxies for huge parties like the BJP, the National Congress, and I guess a much more local example would be the Telugu Desam Party or TRS, right? Especially in the context of the Telangana riots that have happened very, very recently, right? And they use these students to, number one, essentially fulfill their dirty work, and number two, extend their reach and ideologies on student campuses, right? These wings don't actually care for the welfare of these students, and this is what is problematic. All they want to do is proliferate their objectives and expand their voting base, right? A couple years ago when I was in grade 10, I was very, very shocked to see on TV that that students from Osmania University have been mobilized to protest, violently protest, the Telangana riots and be a part of these Telangana riots. And I don't mean 1 or 2 students, I mean 4,000, 5,000 students. And they were protesting to such an extent where the government had to use tear gas on them. This is what the reality is of campus political organizations, organized political organizations on campus, right? And I'd also like to say that it's not very easy to stand up to these politicians that have this sort of external influence. This is the reality. You cannot stand up to these politicians and tell them that this is what we believe in and this is what our ideology is, because at the end of the day, we are students. We don't have as much as pull as these politicians would like us to believe. All we are is we end up becoming rather scapegoats for the dirty work that these politicians or political parties want us to achieve and do on their own behalf, and this is unacceptable, right? They use these students as pawns and give them a false sense of affiliation. And this, I guess, brings me to my second point, that student political activity actually works against democracy and confines students within a particular identity, right? It creates a further divide, forcing them to be associated with those affiliations. Now, what do I mean by that? For example, a young Muslim boy is more likely to be a part of an MIMS youth wing within his college, right? Someone who is more inclined towards Hindutva ideologies is more likely to be a part of APVP political organization within his college. Or someone who is a member of a lower caste group is more likely to be a part of the Dalit association, right? Now, why is this problematic? Because number one, it creates an identity, right? This identity ends up characterizing them for life and confines them within a certain restrictive box, right? Not only are they not allowed to associate with other people who are not a part of their peer groups and understand that their peer groups are most likely going to be made up of these individuals, but they are forced to defend every single issue that comes up as a part of their identity rigorously, regardless of whether or not they believe in it. This is problematic because this defense, it becomes more of a I'm right versus you're wrong versus I'm right, and it becomes a fight. It becomes violent. It becomes problematic because that is not what engagement is supposed to be about, right? And the issue is these students don't have a choice. These students are young, fresh minds who come from all kinds of different backgrounds. They come to a university to learn different things. They come to a brand new space to learn and engage and be a part of different issues. But instead, they are confined within this boundary where they are forced to present and deal with certain issues that come to them because they are a part of this identity. And this is problematic because it restricts them from being intellectually free at a time when a student is supposed to have the opportunity to learn and to become more intellectually available in terms of engaging with different ideologies, right? These political parties essentially play on these students' insecurities and rope them in for their own political gain. And this is extremely problematic because it creates a larger divide on caste and religion. Now, this is not about engagement anymore. This is about my caste is better than your caste, my caste is facing issues versus yours is not, my religion is better than your religion, and that is what the root of this violence is. That's what these political parties bank on to encourage violence. They bank on this kind of distrust between students to encourage this violence so they can go and make newspaper headlines, so they can get their votes, so their issues are fulfilled. And that is absolutely unacceptable, especially for us as students in India, right? Now, my opposition might and has already come up and told us that the purpose of establishing these unions is to create dialogue. It is to encourage healthy dialogue. It is to encourage students' voices. It is so students can be a part of the political process. Well, we tell you that they can do this without these organized unions. And we tell you that, sure, on one hand, you might be definitely giving the so-called minorities a voice, but on the other, what you're doing is you're legitimizing the majority space. What do I mean by that? The moment you give power to these political unions to come and make the rules, to come and decide what is right and what is wrong, you are also giving that very same power to the majority. You are giving that very same power to the people who you essentially claim that you want to be against. And what happens in the end? These political parties and politicians put their hands up, and the victims are the students. The people who have to suffer are the students. And that is ridiculously unfair and is not what democracy is about, especially on student campus, right? And I guess thirdly, and this also goes to what Professor Hargopal has said, that student ideas should be heard, and this is the only way for their ideas to be heard. We tell you that we do want politics. We don't want to ban engagement. You know, if you take the model of the IITs, the NLUs, the NLUs, the IITs, if you take these models, especially at NALSAR, right? Here at NALSAR, we don't have student political organizations on an organized basis, right? We don't have the BJP and Congress coming in and telling us that this is necessarily an organization and these are our rules and these are our framework. Our ideas, our political engagement remains apolitical, right? We do have engagement. We are at a position where we are able to invite speakers from a broad political spectrum to come and speak to us. We have panel discussions. We have elections that are apolitical with the sole focus of focusing on student welfare. And that is what is important, ladies and gentlemen. It's not about having so-called political engagement that isn't really for our issues, right? Our issue is not the Telangana dispute. Our issue is not the Kaveri water dispute. It might be outside of an academic sphere, yes, but within an academic sphere, that is not what we should be concerned about. That is not what we should be fighting about and killing each other over. That is not the point. That is absolutely not the point. We tell you that at NALSAR, we are very, very proud to have a space where we can discuss without being confined within a certain ideology, and we believe that that is what we can achieve by banning this kind of organized political activity altogether, right? We want a healthy presence of engagement, and that's precisely what we're trying to advocate for, without any sort of communal polarization. And we believe that this can be achieved by banning organized political activity. So I guess why I tell you why this is beneficial is because today, if me and a group of friends want to protest a certain institutional policy within NALSAR, right, we can. And tomorrow, if there's another issue that my same group of friends want to protest against, but I don't necessarily agree with it, I can stand back. I can raise my voice without being yelled at, without being held accountable, without being told that I'm a backstabber, without being told that I'm this, without being kicked out of my identity. I still have my identity. That narrative is with me, and that is what is important. The fact is, elections should not be running on power play or majority influence or creating blocks, but rather student welfare, keeping in mind what is best for us students and society as a whole. And I guess lastly, I want to mention that although we discussed how these political organizations create a divide on religious and caste basis, we didn't really discuss how these political organizations within a student space affect women and further contribute to gender inequality, right? And I see some people rolling their eyes at me, but I think this is what makes it a little more important. Because the fact is, to anyone who is a part of student politics before, especially on this panel or in the audience, I ask you, when was the last time you remember a woman being a part of the room when you all had discussions, when you made decisions? When was the last time you remember hearing a woman's voice and actually dealing with women issues that matter within your campus, not only within your campus, but within society as such, right? And we tell you this, the reason that is, and I understand that this is also a bigger issue that needs to be addressed, but the reason that is because political engagements, political campaigning, political organizations, especially on a campus space, are necessarily and invariably patriarchal. What do I mean by this? Is they prefer certain traits such as body language, such as confidence while speaking, such as different male traits that might exist predominantly within males, and they prefer these traits and encourage these traits as such, which is an issue on campus, regardless of what these political organizations come in and tell us, right? And the reality is these political parties are not necessarily concerned with the welfare of students. Their goal is not to promote gender equality or equality on campus. Their goal is to achieve their own means and to achieve those means through whatever it is, regardless if the student is at stake and the student has to suffer, right? So what happens is these political organizations take over campus spaces, they take over the narrative, and they become the predominant, the prevailing narrative that exists. And that is an issue because on campus, we are supposed to have a free space where we're allowed to discuss and engage and learn and evolve, not be confined within a certain ideology and have that ideology dominating us time and again. And we believe that this is especially problematic, right? The moment that these external parties come into play, as we have already shown you, and they only want to exploit these students for their own interests. The fact is, it's not really about welfare, it's not really about engagement, it's not really about productive discussion, but rather political parties doing what they want us to do, and even if that means violence, which is why we are advocating for the complete ban of organized political activity on campuses. We believe that we can have healthy discussion and healthy engagement through various avenues, which is not necessarily organized political politics on campus and does not have the external sort of influence that these politicians and political parties are doing time and again. We believe that this is a healthy way to go about it, and we believe that this is a mature way for our democracy to function and for students to be a part of that democracy. With that, I'd like to conclude. For us to make the change, it's time that we actually start talking about it and we actually do it. And if that includes banning these political organizations on campus, then that is a must. It does not matter what a politician tells you, it does not matter what the media tells you. What matters is what affects us, our welfare. We are the students. YSR, Jagan Mohan Reddy, these people are not students. We are, and that is what matters. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarla. A gentle reminder, please either switch off your mobile phones or keep it on flight mode for the smooth conduct of the debate. I am now happy to invite Mr. Shankar Aiyar to present his views against the motion.
Mr. Moderator, I come here as a representative of dirty politics that is attempting to exploit the individual. This is a fascist attitude that you are going to through authoritarianism decide that you'll ban this, you'll ban the other, and then you'll grow up and say what you're going to ban beef eating, ban cow slaughter, ban this and ban the other. How can an 18-year-old want to ban things? I'm amazed. We as a political party, and therefore by definition evil, were the ones who decided that 18-year-old boys and girls have the maturity to vote in an election and determine who will be the ruling party. And here I find my worthy opponents denigrating the very minds that we believed were independent enough and sufficiently mature to be able to determine the future of our country. Do you or do you not respect the ability of the audience before you to be able to withstand illegitimate pressures and widen their knowledge by listening to organized political parties placing different points of view? I'm very impressed with Sarla Samira's arguments and her method of presenting them, and really would sincerely hope that she one day joins our filthy ranks, because she may be able to clean it up. But if she goes out of NALSAR and says, I'm going to have nothing to do with politics in India, I'm going to have nothing to do with political parties, then the filth will continue, and she, like a lotus, can float above the dirt. I don't think that's responsible politics. I don't think you can say to yourself that because politics, I love the expression that she used. She said that political parties are making scapegoats of all of you for dirty politics. I mean, how can a NALSAR student be a scapegoat? Don't you have minds of your own? Can't you distinguish between good and evil, between right and wrong? Don't you have the intelligence to determine whether, to use Mr. Sultan's expression, you have empathy for the poor or not? Apparently you can't have empathy for the poor if you belong to a political party. Samira says, why aren't you focusing on gender politics? But I'll tell you why I'm not in your eyes focusing on general politics. Because as a politician, I have had a major role with another politician, the Prime Minister of India, in preparing and passing two major constitutional amendments that have resulted in a situation where in Parliament the share of women is only 8% of the total, whereas in our local bodies, thanks to the 73rd and 74th amendments and improvements that have been made since, out of a total of 32 lakh elected members of local bodies, close to 15 lakh are women, and 86,000 of them are heading the local bodies, only in rural India. Who passed this? Dirty politicians sitting in a filthy parliament. This kind of parodying of politicians is legitimate. But what is illegitimate is denigrating our democracy. I'd like to remind my worthy opponents that when we became independent in 1947, we were one of 51 members of the United Nations. Today, there are 198 member states of the United Nations. In other words, approximately 150 countries have come to liberation of one kind or the other and qualified for membership after we became independent. But of all these 150 countries, we are the only one to have started as a democracy, continued as a democracy, and never departed from the path of constitutional democracy. And to take the people responsible for this massive achievement and lump them all together as filthy politicians working for their own interests and not understanding student welfare is to denigrate the single biggest achievement of India as an independent country. You cannot have a democracy without politics, and adversarial politics at that. And you cannot have adversarial politics without political parties. And it is for the citizen, whether he is bright enough to get into NALSAR or whether he is too poor to get into NALSAR, to exercise his own judgment as to whom to support and whom not to support. And moreover, to have the liberty to support Modi today and Rahul Gandhi tomorrow or the other way around. That is up to you. And if you lack the ability to discriminate between which is the political party in your personal interest and which is the political party which is not in your personal interest, then do you really deserve to be in NALSA? Do you really think these youngsters here do not have the ability to participate in a discriminating manner in political activity? After all, you're here for only 5 years at most. When you go out, you have to face the world. Now, Mr. Sultan said that you have to have skills, interpersonal skills. Yeah, sure, you have to have interpersonal skills. But don't you think you need to understand what politics is really about in order to be able to undertake a real decision? In Osmania University, which was condemned just now for participating in the creation of Telangana, were 5,000 people misled by political parties to come out onto the streets? Or was there a cause which motivated them to come out? If you say that political parties entering campuses amounts to leading students by the nose as if they were cattle, that is to misunderstand the student body. The student body is probably the most difficult to mobilize and motivate in a direction other than the one in which they wish to go. Which is why you have, to take two examples that I'm more familiar with than Hyderabad, you have an ethos in Jawaharlal Nehru University that frequently, almost always, leads to left-wingers being elected, and an ethos in Delhi University which almost always leads to right-wingers being elected. What it means is that there are students in JNU who tend, because of the kind of teaching there, the kind of ethos there, the dhaba culture, to come to the conclusion that we need to be radical. And in Delhi University, which is spread over several different campuses and doesn't really have the kind of integrated student body that we have at JNU, they tend to be more conservative. Now, is it illegitimate for the BJP to exist? Is it illegitimate for the Communist Party of India to exist? And if political parties have the kind of influence in student politics that has been alleged by my worthy opponents, I would like to know how Kanhaiya Kumar became the student hero of JNU. He belongs to a political party that has been unable to elect a single member to the Lok Sabha. If they have a member, he is in the Rajya Sabha, D. Raja. But you have a university body deciding that among all their students, the one who is the most charismatic leader is somebody who belongs to a political party of such obscurity as to almost be negligible. And you have at Delhi University, at least since 1976, when that misguided university, which is my alma mater, elected Arun Jaitley as their president, as the first ABVP president. Now, I'll never forgive Delhi University for that. But there are many among you, especially the great champion of GST, Sultan there, who would say that it's a great thing that Arun Jaitley learnt his politics at Delhi University, overthrew the rule of the Congress, which had been totally dominant in Dusu, and not only became the finance minister of India and rolled out his favorite thing, the GST, because don't forget he's an entrepreneur and therefore has to make a lot of money and will now make even more money with the GST, and says that my party, which was the one that introduced the GST bill, is the one which has irresponsibly held it up. Irresponsible? You got a GST which is now being bullied by entrepreneurs like him into supporting, which says that there is to be no dispute settlement authority because the GST Council will function as a dispute settlement authority. How can politicians, a group of chief ministers, sit and listen to the enormously complicated tasks, tax debates, in which if not Sultan himself, but Sultan's ilk is deeply involved. The number of tax disputes, the value of tax disputes in the courts is close to 10 lakh crore rupees. Are they going to sit as a court and make a decision about these disputes that come up in tax matters? I think it's a very ill thought out bill. They've kept out all the products that are revenue generating, such as alcohol. The result is that the GST rate has been calculated to get pushed up to 27% when our direct tax rate is only 33%. We argued against that. We said, please have a cap on it. But no, he's not a politician, so he assiduously promotes his interests. I don't have any income other than the salary and pension that I get from Parliament, so I am interested in the nation. I am interested in the national interest. It makes not a penny of difference to me, personally, whether we have a GST or not. It makes an enormous amount of difference to the business community. So the business community then starts backing those politicians and political parties who will promote their interests. And what do students do? Fortunately, you're not entrepreneurs. Maybe you'll become one day. But today, you have the capacity, which Sultan and I do not have, to be able to make up your minds on an objective basis on what you believe is the national interest. I've never heard of a student saying it's in my caste interest or in my personal interest. What he says is he sees this as a priority concern for our national politics and takes a position on that. And he's free to change his mind. I went after Delhi University to Cambridge. We had a conservative association. We had a labor club. We had a liberal society. We had a communist party group. And I decided to join the Marxist society. And so when I passed the Foreign Service exam, they kept me out of all civil services, saying that I'm a Chinese agent. I've gone from being a Chinese agent at the start of my career to being a Pakistani agent now. I have the right to hold a point of view. I go back to that den of leftist fascism, the Jawaharlal Nehru University. I was invited on this coming Sunday, 2 days from now, to speak to the National Students Union of India, that is the Congress Party's student wing, on the saffronization of education. I accepted. Then they changed their minds and said, will you please speak on the Modi government's Pakistan policy? So I wrote back to them to say that my views on Pakistan are such variance with the Congress Party's views that before you renew your invitation to me, please check with the NSUI president whether a congressman of some standing like myself can come in and speak to the NSUI on a completely different basis to the official spokesman's statement yesterday. And just before coming here, I opened my computer and I find a letter from them saying, sir, we want to listen to your views. Please come in. Where is the dirty politics in this? Why can't the NSUI function as a student wing of a political party? Even as it gives the right to the ABVP to explain why you have to beat up Dalits because they are in the leather trade. Ask them. And that's the place to ask them, in a university campus. And if still the number of Gorakshaks in NALSAR is greater than those of the protectors of the Dalits, well, that's the direction in which India will go. But unless you have so persuaded them that they're going to change their vote, I suspect that they're going to be on my side of the argument rather than the ABVP side. And if the ABVP comes in here and gives you a lot of money and puts up posters, are you so shallow in your intelligence and your thinking as to say that because he gave me 10 rupees, therefore I'm going to vote for him? If you, the electorate, are of such a low order, then our politics will be of such a low order. Don't blame the politician if you demand the money and he provides it to you. Ask yourself whether you should allow yourself to be bribed. And my experience of grassroots politics, I have fought 7 elections from the same constituency. I won 3 times, I've lost 4 times. Is that if you offer money to the electorate, they'll take it. But who gives them the most money? By definition, the ruling party. Who gives them less money? By definition, the opposition party. In which case, why doesn't Jayalalitha win when she's in office? And why doesn't Karunanidhi win when he's in office? The people overthrow them. They take the money from both sides and they exercise their own judgment. And if people in villages and slums can exercise their own minds and make politics, or electoral politics, a game of revenge. I elected you last time, kick you out this time. And the pleasure they get in throwing elected representatives off. I mean, I know that Sultan has a bottom line that is somewhere near the sky today, and his greatest ambition is to take it further, nearer Jannat. Well, we know that if we get elected today, we're going to be defeated tomorrow. But it's all right, because when we're defeated tomorrow, we may get elected day after tomorrow. So we live in a world where we have to deal with real problems. And if we can bring these real problems into university campuses and have the students participate not only at an intellectual level, which is a level that is permissible in a university, but the day you step out, you have to deal with the real world. So if we can give you skills, not only the ones that Sultan mentioned, but the other skill of dealing with the real world, of being able to make a choice and have yet the right to change your choice next time round, then we would have made you better citizens of this great democracy of ours. It's easy to lampoon politicians, especially politicians who are of a lower social class than you, who are less literate than you, who speak worse English than you. You can mock them. Who are these dhotiwalas? But these dhotiwalas are far more representative of the people of India than any of you can ever hope to be. Because you've been destroyed by your origin from being part and parcel of the soil of India. And the soil of India is dirty. So there will be some crooks. I'm sure I'll be able to beat Sultan in naming the number of crooked businessmen in India. So therefore, should we stop all entrepreneurs? I think he may be able to beat me in naming a larger number of crooked politicians than sound politicians. But that's life. We take it. And it's best that you learn how to handle these problems at a young age, but a mature age. I'm not asking for political parties to go into high schools. But I am saying that I've attended debates in schools where high school students have impressed me. But I'm told that if you're a high school student and you murder somebody, then you won't get sent to jail. Whereas if you become a college student and murder somebody, the chances are that you will be hanged. Now, if there is one killing on one campus, as Adithya mentioned, you're going to stop all politics on all campuses. And don't you have killings on campuses that don't have politics? And where is Rohit Vermula was trying to fight a social problem? It was the social problem of casteism in his university. It was not political parties that came in and created that casteism. There was palpable casteism in his university. He tried to fight it. He felt he was losing the battle. And he was then targeted by a political party which was influencing the vice chancellor of the university, not the student bodies. And that is how a situation was created in which political parties were present to express their sympathy for Rohit's case or their opposition to Rohit's case. But the problem lay in the student body, that there were students and possibly some teachers who were behaving on a casteist basis. Now there is caste in our society, and we've tried to attack that problem. We've made more progress in 50 years in dealing with casteism than in the 5,000 years over which it was created. So it is important to recognize, when you say that why is my identity being questioned, Samira, just turn 2 steps from you. Sultan began by saying that he has a major problem of religious identity. If in this university you will not take up the issue of identity, which is fundamental to the problem of India, that we cannot be a united country unless we recognize the sub-identities. I belong to India's smallest minority. I am a Tamil Brahmin refugee from Pakistan. Now there are not very many of those. And I was asked in my school, do you eat rasam at home? I confess that we eat rasam at home. So then these North Indian boys would ask me, so eat it this way. That's casteism. So what do? Opt out of it or face up to it? And then I realized that when I was 11 years old and the first Annapurna came up in Delhi, and my father very proudly took his North Indian friends to the thing to feed them with South Indian food, he produced a masala dosa, and his Sardaji friend said, "Ek hi hai." And my father explained that this is a Madrasi omelette. Today you go to the Nathula Pass, you will be given masala dosa. It's the way in which we overcome our issues. And I really rather doubt that the identity problem is very serious in a place like NALSAR, because you belong to a class which identifies itself. It's those who don't have a class with which they can with pride identify themselves, who find their identities in language or in ethic or in color or in race. And therefore you have to understand that this problem of identity is a very real one. And we should be sympathetic with people who wish to express their individual identity. What Sultan was saying was that we must learn how to accept that he is both a Muslim and an Indian, and that he cannot be an Indian unless he is accepted as a Muslim, and that unless he can be a Muslim, he cannot be an Indian. Now this is not a problem for you, Samira. It's a problem for him. It's not a problem for me either. Once I got over my Rasam syndrome, it was not a problem for me. But the minorities of India, the oppressed classes of India, they all have a real identity problem. Because the minute they look at your fair skin, the minute they look at the way you're dressed, the minute they listen to you speaking with that delightful American accent, they immediately know that you belong to the stratosphere and they belong to Patal. And that is where they're trying to escape from. And if in a university which is otherwise elitist, you are not exposed to the real problems of the people, you will leave the university and become an armchair critic. You will sit in your very comfortable chair and you will say, this Prime Minister, ullu aadmi hai, kuch nahi janta hai. And then next, you have an election, you say, kick this guy out, bring in another man. Then you get upset with him. And so it becomes, democracy becomes Natha Singh, Prem Singh, one under the same thing. Is this how you want to run this democracy? And in any case, if you think that political parties are so dirty that they shouldn't enter the university campus, tomorrow, when you become a responsible citizen of India, do you want to be in the armchair or do you want to be in politics? Would you have the guts to do what Kejriwal did? Came up from next to nowhere. I was trying to run an NGO and I told him on a television program, and there was another BJP man with me, Ravi Shankar Prasad. And we both said to him, if you want to make a difference, you form a political party. And neither did he know that he was going to get only 3 seats against 67 for the Aam Aadmi Party, nor did I know that we would get 0 seats against 67 for the Aam Aadmi Party, and we brought the guy in. So I could go on and on. I must say I feel like going on and on, but I really must give you the opportunity of participating, and so I'll take your leave. But I beg you to understand that if we are going to retain our democracy and retain the values that are included in the Constitution, if we are going to complete the task of equality that was begun by Dr. Ambedkar, but who on the day the Constitution was passed warned that we've only got political equality, we've got a lot more to do in terms of social and economic equality. You have to be participants in our democracy. And where better to learn being a participant instead of an armchair critic than to be involved with politics at the university level. Thank you.